Cool. Right. Welcome to etc. the podcast. I don't know which episode it is. I'm gonna say 8 or 9, but it could even be 6 or 7, and that's how we roll. The podcast with no schedule, and here I am in shadow, like Nosferatu. Um, and my guest today sent me a very long bio, multiple pages. I said, say as much as you can about yourself, really show yourself off. And he's done a lot in his poetry career. He's an amazing person. I'm really excited for you to see our conversation. But he did just send me a list of all the classes he does. So I've had a read of that, but I'm just going to do a little bio as well. So he teaches, he does art, he curates exhibitions, he works with other people, he writes his own poetry, he's created his own pamphlet, he headlines gigs, he runs gigs, he's run a lot of gigs over the years. I first met him either at a gig we were both at or at the Jolly Sailor. I used to go to that a fair bit every now and again. I'm sure he can and will clarify. And that's all I can really say about him at the moment. And then we'll get more into it in a bit. So, hello, Gary. How are you this evening?
Hello, my name's Gary.
Yeah.
Just been fine, but yeah, I'm fine. Set. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How's your audio? Does it clip? Does your audio clip?
What does that mean?
Because it just clipped out like for 2 seconds. It just went and then it went silent, and then your voice came back.
It could have been. No, mine's absolutely fine.
All right, no worries. Okay, cool. So, we shall proceed. This is like the lockdown days, isn't it? Did you have a good lockdown?
Yeah, I was very lucky because I was working for a food bank, and a lot of cynical people thought that lockdown was just like heavy colds, and
Mm,
so I was working with a bunch of people who didn't take any precautions at all.
yeah.
So I could keep working, and because I was in lockdown and helping out people, I could still drive around and go places. So I was very lucky. I was viewed as an emergency service, and I had a photocopied piece of paper. So if the police stopped me in the street, I would
Mm,
be okay. And I was already working on Zoom, so I just carried on working on Zoom for my writing. So yeah, lockdown was, I
yeah.
don't want to say easy, but I'm a half a hermit, so it was a pleasure.
We discovered a lot of things during lockdown, some of which we can't say. And I think all I think really is, Bill Gates is a lovely man. Um, sorry. Yes. What band shirt have you got today? I've got Smashing Pumpkins.
I've got
Oh, you got Radiohead.
I've
Brilliant.
got very
Okay.
early Radiohead, because it ends just above the belly, so the camera can just see that and not see the stomach. So that's quite good, and because it's very striking. I've never known if it was a bear or a monster or whatever, and I don't read any press, so yeah. But it's
Yeah. Well,
it's Radiohead, and that's all you need to know.
that's fine. Would you say you have a saving? I don't want to say complex, but would you say you have like a saving instinct? Saving people instinct.
Uh, so this is a poetry podcast, right?
This is
And sort
like
of
a
like,
live pod. Any,
how would
by
you
the way,
pose it?
I should have prefaced any question that you don't feel comfortable with, just say skip, and we'll just move on, and I'll edit it out.
Um, no, not at all. I studied counselling for 3 years till I got kicked off for being unaware.
Yeah.
And that was the second course that I got kicked off for being unaware. This is going to sound absolutely terrible when it goes on the internet. Um, and part of that is to know whether you're a white knight, whether you want to ride in on a horse, and whether you want to save people. The other
Mm.
part of that is having an understanding of what's the difference between empathy and sympathy. So anybody can kind of go, oh, let me help you, let me save you. But in reality,
Hey,
everybody,
man.
yeah, everybody has to own their own problem. And so no, for me, it's not about saving until about 5 years ago, until I started at the food bank 6 years ago. I didn't even think about it. I like helping people, but I
Mm.
don't put myself in situations where I have to help people. Um, it's just if
Mm.
someone comes to me, I'm not very selfish. So if someone comes to me, I won't go, yeah, but it's Wednesday and I want to watch Coronation Street. You know,
Mm.
I'll
Well,
be, I will try and help people if I can.
that would be
Like,
monstrous though if someone did that, wouldn't it? But Anyway,
Yeah, but there are people for whom it's sort of like as soon as they hear somebody's in problem, they just go, "Oh God, I'm going to have to listen to this." You know, like one of my relatives, my uncle, says, "Well, I'm famous for having no empathy, famous for it," and it's like a boast. Whereas that's an appalling thing to say. I think all we can do is be the best that we can at that particular moment. And if you're having a stressy day, then you can't be good. If you're having
it's like what Gandalf said, all we can do is make the most of the time that we're given. Yeah, so Gandalf, what a legend. Viewers may realize that I've changed the angle of the box that I balance my computer on slightly so that I look less ugly as it's slightly more from the side. So anyway, cheers to that. So moving on to
they may
the
not have even noticed, but now you've told them.
well,
You've told them now.
I realized that in these recordings so far, I've looked mostly horrifying, but then when I speak, I feel like I look rather, there is a appealing quality there. So, but who can really see themselves? In fact, that's I meant to speak to you about that. Remind me that I need to speak to you about the hidden the shadows Jungian self later on.
Yeah, you
Right.
won't get very far with that, but yeah, go ahead, go ahead. So just why, if we're allowed to ask questions on a podcast,
Oh, please, yes.
why did you? Because you didn't actually tell anybody the CV, which by the way, people she asked me to send. They give me as much details as possible.
It just said every class you've ever taught. It didn't
It's
say
one
anything
side. No,
about
it
the
doesn't
miners
say every class.
exhibition.
It says 20 years of projects. That's what it does. It doesn't say any classes that I've taught. It just says 20 years of projects.
Okay,
Because don't forget, it's not just a CV for you, it's a CV for people who want to give me work.
that's very true.
Fine.
Are you happy though with how this is going so far? I'll edit that bit out. Are
No,
you
you
all
don't
right?
have to. You don't have to add anything out. I mean, I'm curious to know why you decided to start with. Do you have a savior complex, or do you have a
Well,
saving people
I think it's
complex?
because we were
Because you didn't
talking about the
mention that
food.
to anybody.
I think we were talking about the food bank, so then that got me
Oh yeah.
thinking. Because I know later on I've got some stuff about both yours and I's writing and whether we think of an audience or whether we see ourselves as championing a group or anything like that. So I've already got that on my mind. But then when you mentioned the food bank, I thought, oh, that might be a thing to, just ask then. But
No,
anyway.
we can circle back at all. It's just I mean I didn't finish there today till 7. So that's sort of like I've got half a slice of toast over there and a jack of potato waiting in the oven.
If you're not
So
being paid overtime for that though, like, or I don't want to talk about your individual case, so let's leave that at the door. But any individual, let's say me, if I wasn't being paid for several, 5, 6 hours in a hypothetical job, that's criminal. But anyway, right. So
we're hearing a lot about your opinions today.
yes, well, this what we're doing now is my ideal way of how to run this. And
Okay.
obviously, when I get a guest who I'm not as close to, or hypothetically, if I get a guest who absolutely hates my guts and blocks me after doing a podcast, hypothetically, then I don't connect to that person. I can't be myself. We can't have a joke. They can't be themselves, and the whole thing was a waste of time. And we might as well have just
So hypothetically, has that happened yet?
no, because it's a hypothetical, and everyone I've had
Okay.
on, they've been amazing. Yes, so go back and watch all them episodes, and then
There's always a first.
that's it. And my favorite one that I've done so far was with Tree. That's good, right? When did you start writing poetry and why?
Um uh the first one I think that my mum saved was when I was about 8, and
Hmm.
I just decided that I was going to be a poet. I'm not one of those people who's got like a huge origin story at all. The only thing I remember is there's a book called Johnny Walker Supertramp, which is about this guy who walks all the way around. I think it's America, and it's a really old book, like 1930s. And for some reason, at about 8, I decided I was going to write a poem about his life. So I just stole all the details from the book, and then I wrote a poem about it. And I think it's very embarrassing, and it rhymes, and I don't know. And then when I went to secondary school, oh yeah, and then I had a really weird thing. I was good at two things, art and writing. And then
Yeah.
when I was in primary school, I had a friend who was better looking than me, who was
Mm.
chasing a girl who was very gorgeous, and he was a little bit daft in his own terminology. All he wanted to do was play football and kiss girls. And I think I was about
Don't we all,
8.
eh? Don't we all?
Well, I think I was about 8 or 9, and I couldn't play football, and I couldn't kiss girls. So I used to write his love letters to this girl, and then
Oh,
that got him the kisses that I sort of wanted but was terrified of. She was called Nadine Hutchinson. He was called Stephen Dobinson, and I
shout
used to
out.
write.
Big love if you're out there.
Yeah, I used to write their love letters. I used to write his love letters to him, and so I got kind of like used to someone being impressed by what I did. And then
Yeah,
I went to secondary school, and it was still the only good thing that I could do was art and writing. That was the only thing I could do.
yeah, yeah. So I'm just
That
going
answer your
to
question?
indeed it does. And also that was in a way your first editing job.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I've done an awful lot of that.
Yeah,
I
and
think
you're
it's
yeah. No,
gone.
please carry on. No, that's fine. Yeah, so well that was good. Good
Are
to
you
know
going
that.
into editing now?
I will be going into editing later, but I just I had an observation, but I thought maybe I'd best not say anything. Um,
You can have an observation. Go on,
well, I was
because
just
you
gonna
can cut it.
say,
So you can cut it, viewers, can't you?
oh
I'm
yeah,
treating this as if it's a live broadcast.
100%,
That's
yeah,
the way
oh
I'm
yeah,
doing it.
yeah, 100%. I can cut it. I hope we get loads of views. We won't. No, we will. Um, of all the people that love us, um, and the people that hypothetically block us. Um, yeah. So is it like this getting involved with people, but a barrier being present? So it's like you're doing this letters for these people, but there's also a barrier, like there's a involvement with like also a barrier and control, again with teaching, again with counseling, again with it's just a way to interact but not interact. But anyway, we don't have to go there, but I'm building a false hypothesis. Yeah.
You are building a false front. No, I mean, he was like, I didn't have a lot of friends at all. I was very much that loner who walked around the playground. I
Mm,
remember giving a ball back to a girl who was playing tennis. If you can imagine this, in the 70s, we had our own gravel tennis courts,
mm,
with dust swirling around, and I gave a ball back to this girl who'd hit it over the net far too far, and it had gone off, and she whacked me with the tennis racket,
mm,
and told me to leave her stuff alone. So I was very
yeah,
much the person who was doing circuits of the playground, watching other people have a good time.
I used to
Um,
do that, yeah, with a young
and
boy
then
called
yeah, and then so I think writing was that was who I was, really. That was what I
oh my
was.
god, I should get like a card, make like a crude cardboard, like Hollywood, like chart thing. Yeah, I'll do that. That'd be cool. Yeah, I used to do that playground thing. I used to just sit in the corner or in the middle of the playground. I used to sit with a boy called Hunter. So he used to sit in the middle, or we used to sit in the corner together. Anyway, good times. Right. Who are your favorite poets?
Oh God, I was dreading this question. Um,
Do you know it's funny because the who are your favorite poets and what are your favorite poems or collections or variations of, no poet can answer. Someone asked me that at a gig and I was like there's something about it. It just doesn't, you know.
I think it's very tricky because like part of it. So I was 12 when punk hit, and that was a rejection of everything that had ever gone before. Except punk was very fast rock and roll. It was played with the same chords. Sometimes they even played the same songs. And so you've got the likes of the Sex Pistols who greatly admired Slade, and you've got the likes of Slade who greatly admired the Sex Pistols. But part of that was we're doing it different. We're not you. We're not you dinosaurs. And so when I was young, it was kind of like, well, one of the lazy criticisms of writing is that you're just aping someone else, or you're copying someone else, or you want to be someone else. And so for years, I did this thing which comes purely out of punk, which is I don't read poetry. I haven't got any influences. I don't really care because, and this is a big reason, when I went to art college in Canterbury, there were a bunch of tutors, and when you went through a tutorial, having sort of like brought your art out and put it on an easel, and you're sitting around, and they would go Goya, Kandinsky, Munch, so and so and so and so, and so basically, and they actually said there is nothing you can think or paint or draw or do which is unique. Everybody's done it before you, and I was so sort of
That's
like,
very depressing. Should have just
yeah,
been like,
yeah,
well, I
yeah. I
should
mean,
go
those,
home.
yeah,
School's
those are
out.
the people. Those, you know, and ironically, they were like late six. They weren't necessarily failures, but they were people who'd gone straight from being in art college to being a tutor in art college, and they were all the same. They were all abstract expressionists, and they all sort of thought anybody who used dark colors was rubbish. Anybody who didn't do blobs was rubbish. I mean, I'm being very rude there. Anybody who didn't do Rothko was rubbish. So in the end, a bunch of us just set up our own critique because
Mm,
they were so negative about it. And I think that that also, because I was writing at the time, that also made me go, well, what's the point of showing these experts if they're so negative about what we do? And
mm,
so, yeah, for
yes.
ages, I didn't actually think or know or admit to having a favorite poet,
Mm.
if that made sense. I just had poems. I could tell you what I didn't like because it had been afflicted on me at school. So that
I
was easy. That was
see.
far easier.
We had this anthology. I posted it a while ago. This AQA one, and everyone was like, "Oh, I hate my AQA anthology and stuff." And I was always reading this AQA anthology. I was actually really into Carol Ann Duffy. She was one of the first people that made me go, "I'm a poet," and I don't care what people say about her, because when I read Onion, that was it for me. That changed the course of my life. And poems like Litany, like that one about the lemon tree or whatever. Um, she's great. I think she's fabulous. So I liked the poetry we did at school. It was I remember my English teacher saying in year eight, "Oh, but you're changing schools, etc." I tried so hard to get you into the top set for next year. Um, and also
But I
I've
think you're lucky.
not you, because I understand your reasons, but I've had certain individuals say to me over the years, "Oh, I don't read poetry," and they mean it in the worst way. And when those individuals have said it to me, my flesh just recoils, because and what I'm about to say doesn't stand, but in a way it does. Well, you wouldn't get in a car and say, "Oh, well, I don't listen to my driving instructor." You wouldn't play the violin and go, "Oh, I don't really, I just picked this up and oh, I just swung it around a bit." Well, you might do, it depends if, but I don't know. I just think that why don't I like it? Why don't I like that? Oh, I don't read poetry. Just you, you wouldn't say I don't listen to music, would you? It just seems unnatural.
Yeah, but there are. I mean, there are. I know people who, for comfort's sake, said we'll go back to poetry in about 30 seconds. But I know people for comfort's sake who, when they drive, they like to listen to those same six albums. And they're so seriously in their car, back in the days of CDs, they would just have those six CDs. So if you went on any journey with them that was longer than 2 hours, or you went on it again, you'd listen to the CDs over and over again. I know someone who's only got three CDs in their entire life, which for me is sort of appalling. I think um, what you had that was different in my generation, which is older, we weren't doing Carol Ann Duffy. We weren't anywhere near it. So like in the teen years, we were doing sort of like the Liverpool Poets and Scaffold and huge, terrible sort of stuff that we were supposed to learn off by heart. Sort of like the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner and sort of Charge of the Light Brigade and stuff like that. And then at exam level, it went to Keats and it went to lots and lots of Ode to a Grecian Urn and Ode to everything else. And then I was really unfortunate in that my sixth form didn't have, or my school didn't have a sixth form. So I had to go to a failed or a collapsed grammar school. So it had lacrosse, it had chess club, it had mutual appreciation club, it had combined cadet force with wooden rifles, and its English department was run by a bunch of ex soldiers. So and so
Blimey.
the guy was called Captain York. It was early 80s. He had he still wore his cape, he still wore his mortarboard. And one of the very first things he said, if you can imagine this for an A-level English literature course, was, we're not studying puffs and cowards. And so
Well,
we didn't study for
you don't
First
want to
World War.
study. I'm not gonna say it, but I would have just thought, well, if you don't want to study, people that are queer, you might as well throw the whole subject out because
Well, we didn't. It meant that we didn't study Sassoon and we didn't study Wilfred Owen. And so,
yeah,
if you can imagine in your A level, you had to do that at home. And so
yeah.
that's how you're trying to pass, and you're being treated in the same way. The government and politics guy was a right winger, and he was called Major Bruce, and he
Oh,
was very much
sorry.
like Fulton Mackay uh, in prison. That was what he was very like in Porridge, and he said, we're not studying socialists, so we won't be studying 1946 and Iron Bevan. We won't be studying the Labour Party. So that was when the people who are supposed to tell you about education, the people who are supposed to tell you about poetry, the people who are supposed to tell you about that. So it was only the art department where the bloke actually loved art.
Mm,
Everybody else was trying to instill their will on you. So a part
yeah.
of that is, don't tell me what I'm supposed to like, because you've got no right to tell me what I'm supposed to like.
Yeah, I have a similar story. My mum studying in Iran, studying people that were obviously homosexual and loving it, and that's fantastic. Um, and she was told that they're just writing about God. And these guys, like the Persian masters, obviously writing pre-Islam, you know, were writing about blatantly graphic homosexual experiences. And she was just told, no, they're writing about God. So there you go. Similar story there. It also makes me think of the Smiths song that's like, a dreaded sunny day, so we'll go away, meet you at the cemetery gates. Keats and Yeats are on your side.
But you see, that's where it kind of kicks in for me, because it's like, um so Samuel Beckett, I met someone who was in love with Samuel Beckett when I was about 18, and so I went to lots and lots and lots of Samuel Beckett, and then it was just and we had to do Waiting for Godot, and it drove me mad until I saw it on stage, and then when I saw it on stage I thought, and then I
Waiting
just,
for Godot is brilliant though, and I think it's a gay story, and I said that to the teacher when we were studying it. I can't remember if I was at school or if I was sixth form or uni, and he said, "No, I haven't seen a queer reading of this," but then I went and found loads of queer readings of it. Look, so yeah,
well, I
I thought
think
it was
it's sort of
interesting.
like, for me, it's his, the man thinks, I think, uniquely, and
Mm,
it was very, very lyrical. It was definitely Irish, but because he loved France so much, it was very, very French. So his novel Malloy Malone and the Unnameable was just sort of like lyricism and poetry, but put into prose. Very weird, very strange. All the Craps Last Tapes, all the plays were just absolutely fantastic. And so that for me hit. And then from there, Brendan Behan, JP Don Levy, and then from there sideways into anyone basically who was writing about stuff that was off the norm. But at the same
mm,
time, in came music. So music
mm.
was very big. Jim Morrison was very big until you read four of his books, and then you think a lot of this is drug induced horse shit. But I loved Jim Morrison for years and years and years and years and years. And that was and it but it was his poetry. My favorite thing the Doors ever done, they didn't do, he did, which is American Prayer, his poetry album. That's my favorite Doors thing. Even though it doesn't
Mm.
hold up to Quizzical. It's a bit like Jimi Hendrix, love his lyrics, but if the music was taken away, do they stand up? Which is
Well,
almost sacrilegious.
that's the thing with these artists is that the point is that you can't take away the music. They are incredible when it's the words to the music and the pace at which they say it. Like Lana Del Rey, her poetry's dreadful, and the songs wouldn't stand up as a poem, but in the song they're everything. Anyway, are you drinking tonight? What are you drinking?
I'm drinking coffee tonight because I don't drink very much. But are
No,
you
I'm
drinking
I'm
tonight?
not drinking like, well, I'm drinking this Aqua
They're,
Libra.
they're terrible. Do you
two
not find
cats.
them terrible? I think they
Sponsored by
just,
Aqua Libra.
but they just taste like carbonated water. But you were on
Well,
wine before, weren't you?
well, I like cucumbers and mint lime, so
Yeah.
um, that should be good. All right, next question. Let us proceed. But feel like we still had a lot to say, but anyway, regardless of which.
Well, you don't have to
Um,
move on, because you can cut this down however much you want to cut it. You
yes, I
know?
know.
Do you
You know,
feel you've covered the poetry? I could tell
this
you
is
about lots of poetry now.
this is gold though. This is what people want to see. Um, um, what do you like about teaching poetry?
Um, I never used to like form.
Mm,
And then I used to think that and I still do to a certain extent. I think that
mm,
I think the form should decide, the poem should decide the form. So I never used to like teaching form. There's bits of it which is based because of my own lack of knowledge. So I
mm-hmm,
don't like sonnets. I like the fact that there are modern sonnets. I like the fact there are Shakespearean sonnets. I like the fact there are Italian sonnets, etc., etc., etc. But what I like is how a sonnet can fit an intense mood. That's
mm,
what I like.
yeah.
I'm sort of like free verse predominantly, but I also like I like speculars, I like all these things. I don't like it where what you're looking at is just form and you're so
Mm,
entranced by form that the content doesn't work. But what I like is being able to say to someone, okay, here's some examples of a quatrain, for example. Here's some examples of a duplex, which is quite a new form. I came up with something called a tower block, and I like going, here's examples of it. Um, Try it, see if you like it, see if it works for you. And I like giving people
yeah.
like a little opportunity. There are people who do it much, much better than me, who know the forms inside out, but for me, it's not about proving how intelligent I am, which, as you can tell, would be a very difficult thing to do. It's about giving someone, saying, have a look at this, see if you like it. If you like it, does it fit your subject matter? Doesn't matter to
Mm.
me if it doesn't. For me, the poem's
Well,
still got to stand on its own, no matter what form it is. But I like giving people or enabling people to get a spark, find a
it's really
way in.
more about the relationship with the students and what that is and what the benefits are, what the limits are, what that means to you. And 'cause I'm at, I'll tell you where I am. This is my problem. Okay, this is my one of my
You're
top.
interviewing yourself at this point, are you?
You've spoken like non-stop. All your answers have been like,
That's the idea, isn't it? Isn't that the idea?
please don't start it. Okay, right. Let me. Oh, what are we talking about? Right. Yeah.
You were talking about the relationship between teacher and pupil.
Yeah. This is my issue, right? My issue now facing me in life is what is our relationship to each other? What is my relationship to you? What is my relationship to my family? What is my relationship to the people that I pass in the street? And who am I to anyone? And what form should that take? And how meaningful should we be to each other? This is what eats me away at night, is how meaningful should we be to each other? And sometimes I think human beings are so vulnerable, and guess what? We're all gonna die, that we should just desperately clutch onto each other, cowering and just cry,
Is
because
that what you want to do? Is
that's all
that what
that's
you want to
part
do? Desperately clutch onto each other and cower and die? Is that it?
that's
Got to be more to life than that, for
they're
fuck's sake.
like but it's just like I feel like we are so alone and so vulnerable, and yet we make nothing of the opportunity we have. We just use it for hatred and snippiness and, oh, look at my neighbor, they're doing this or that again. And it's just what should we mean to each other? So that's like when I ask about, what does it mean for you to have a pupil? Like, what does it mean for you to have, a neighbor or whatever? Like, how meaningful is that to you? Or how meaningful should it be?
Oh, I see. I can't subscribe to that level of negativity because I don't think it. I don't think it's that bad. I think there are people who are wankers, and I think there are people who are selfish, and I think there are people who are sadistic, and I think there are people who are driven by lust or driven by money or driven by personal revenge and things like that. But I don't view it like that. So
Yeah.
when I start, if someone wants to come into my class, you pay the money and you're in.
Mm.
The money is not a lot. The money is like £110 for 14 hours. It's ridiculous. It's the cheapest thing you'll ever get. You know, the hot yoga, as you're always talking about, is like £40 a lesson, and paddleboarding is
Don't
XYZ.
forget, don't forget the spiritual healer.
Yeah, but it gives but what it says to someone is, okay, well now you're in. And so
Yeah.
when they're in, if there's someone who constantly interrupts, if there's someone who is very negative, it's like I used to work with someone, and they'd bring a poem and they would go, okay, so this is true, this happened from a real event, this is true. And then you can hear that for maybe once or twice, but then you have to say to them, yeah, well, when we're giving you feedback, what we're doing is we're giving you feedback on a poem that you presented to the group. So you
Mm.
presented, it might be true, it might be the most important thing in the world, but what you've done is you've presented it to the group as something to be critiqued. You can't then go, I don't like your critique.
Mm.
So for me, the relationship forms from someone who's never shared before sharing, and then
Mm.
someone who's never read out loud before performing, and then
Mm.
someone who has never taken or even understood or even wanted any type of criticism, taking it. And then you get people who are going through great pain and great difficulty, or feel very, very lost with their writing, but
Mm.
they trust you. So it's a huge level of trust to have people say to you, you know, this is the best part of my week.
Yeah.
You guys are the best part of my week, and that's the way I feel. Is that this is, you know, my Friday afternoons teaching are my favorite Friday afternoons. So that
Yeah.
it's a connection, it's trust, it's looking at someone's inside sometimes, or sometimes it's just looking at their craft, and it's them feeling safe and feeling confident and feeling able to bring something, particularly if they don't know if it works. So it's not about creating a safe zone, or, you know, allowing someone to express their inner feelings. That's part
Mm.
of it. But the main part of it is that we want to be there with each other, and we want to share. We
Mm.
want to say, you know, I've done this. I don't think it's right. Have a look. You know, like I've got someone who, if I don't put a title in the poem, gets really frustrated with me because they can't access it straight away. But for me, it's like, I don't know, wait a bit, then see what
Yeah,
happens.
cool. Well, I think the idea is, to read the poem, isn't it? But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I guess it doesn't solve my crisis, but um,
I
I
can't
shall.
solve your crisis, you know. But I mean, for me, it's like it's absolutely vital. If I've been told numerous times, and it's not. I'm not just saying this to big myself up or whatever. The group is what helps people. The group, the people on your course, the people that you meet up with, the people you trust, the people you take the piss out of, the people you know, you ask after. Some of my best friends have come out of my classes. It doesn't always make it easy,
Mm.
because, you know, I've got someone at the moment who insists on writing far longer than the word count, and that they write far longer than the word count because it's important to them to write X at the moment. And so I have to pull them up on it. And there's a little bit of hurt because I'm pulling them up on it. But at the end of the day, it's also about equality. 6 people in the class get 10 minutes each to say a piece. If someone does something that's 150 words longer than the word count, then they're
Mm.
cutting into their friend and their colleagues' writing time. So
Yeah.
it's equality, it's honesty, it's togetherness, it's discovering new things. It's sitting there and going, oh, blimey, that's a bit good, isn't it? I'm going to have to up my game. That's a
Mm.
big part of it for me, is upping my game.
Yes, indeed. That's true. Right. Oh, Jimmy.
I don't have short answers set.
No, that's fine. That's good. It's so boring when you get someone on and then hypothetically, and then you're like, who's your favorite poet? X. What da, 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 da.
Well,
Why?
I can answer bits of those,
Yeah.
because I do have them,
Yeah.
um, but we can circle back to them, and then you can edit them in, and can you drop them in the right place
I'm
so
gonna
they
just
look.
edit random things in, like random like apparitions.
You can
I
do
won't
that if
do
you
that.
want. Well, at the moment, you're telling us a lot about yourself at the moment, so that's quite good. Is that what this is about? Is it
Yeah,
about
this
me
is all
coaxing it out of you?
this is all about my ego. Um,
I didn't mention ego.
where d where does visual art and writing meet for you, and what is the relationship of visual art and writing? See, I'll preface by saying this. When I was doing art, my kind of way of doing art was to try and, like, sandwich, like, poetry in there. Like, when you try and, like, hide the vegetables for kids? Like, that was, like, what I was doing, like, so and then afterwards I thought maybe this isn't it. Maybe I'm doing, an injustice to a form. But anyway, what's the relationship between the two for you?
So I really, when I was studying art, so basically I was good at two things: writing and art. So every
Mm,
time I did a bit of writing, I did an illustration. Every time
yeah,
I did some art, it usually had some writing in it, right? So those two bled across. And then when I went to art college, I really liked Barbara Kruger. I really liked John
mm,
Hartfield. I really liked Peter Kennard, who's got a great exhibition at the Whitechapel, all in support of Palestine. So that would be a really good one.
yes, yeah,
And they are collage artists, and they have words and they have slogans. They have that. And then when I went on to proper art college, when I went on to do the degree after the foundation, I was writing poems and illustrating them, and then I was making banners, making placards, making posters. Every illustration I had every installation I had poetry in it. Sometimes projected, sometimes painted on the wall, sometimes just the words themselves on lots of tiny, tiny, tiny bits of paper. So one of them was about voting, and it had a ballot box, and then flowing out of the ballot box were all these boats, and on the boats were everyone's wishes for, like a different government. So they're linked. I do the two things at the same time, but I write more poetry now and more prose now than I do art. But I like them together. I
the
don't
problem
see I
with
don't
art
see
is
any
that
barrier at all.
the problem with art is that the materials take money, and you need the space to store the stuff. Now, for me, poetry was a way out of a very serious situation, and it went really well because what do you need for poetry? A pencil and a scrap of paper. So I think in financially, it is a very accessible hobby,
Right.
craft.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's very intimate as well. So
Mm,
if you take something really simple at secondary school, um, it was an era of massive amounts of football hooliganism, and football was very important. It was an all boys school. Football was really important. Football wasn't important to me at all. I didn't like sport. I can't play sport. I've got no bounce. I've got no natural ability. So,
mm,
but what I did have was music. So I'd sit in there with one headphone, like Morrissey and his Death Aid, and my stereo was about that big before Walkmans, and I hid it in my
yeah,
bag. And on my bag, I wrote down every single hit that Blondie had ever had, how many places it had gone. So you've got a bag that is like a walking testament of what you believe in. And then in your pocket, you've got a little notebook with your random scribblings and
mm.
your ventings and your notes and everything else. So poetry is like an escape, but it's also a weapon. You can kind of right wrongs even if you never send it to people.
Oh, well, that opens up a whole world of. Yeah, I mean, I always thought of it as a very unjust tool that I had on my side because I had the last word and I had the way of framing it. Um, so I had the last word, I had the narrative, I was the god of the situation. And
Mm,
what life has shown me very violently, and this isn't a joke or like me messing around, is that there is, even in the most difficult situations, multiple perspectives in a situation. So I almost felt like abusive at times to be this. this
In what?
one that got to tell her story. Um,
Did anybody else read it?
I used to give my poems to my mum to read, but she would like cry, so then I stopped.
But how so without obviously this isn't a therapy session because I never fully qualified as a diploma in person-centered counselling. But
Mm,
if nobody sees it,
yeah,
what harm are you doing? So how
yeah.
can you be a horrible person if nobody suffers your judgment?
Well, I am publishing books, but it's,
No,
you
now
know,
though, but I mean we're talking back then.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
I
were
know.
in charge in that you were the person who'd written it, but you weren't actually bashing people with it. You weren't sending it to them in secret.
Oh, no, 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 God, no, yeah. No, but
No,
you know what I mean? Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it's like there's this one of my favorite poems is this poem called Dolphin, and I can't remember who it's by, but he was one of the confessionals. He spent a lot of time, mentally unwell and stuff, and he had this line at the end of it, my eyes saw what my hand did."
right,
And I
okay,
kind of I always really felt that.
yeah.
Um, Next question. Um,
There are questions.
right. Is activism or politics important in your writing or art practice, we'll say?
Um, yeah, I think well, I mean, anybody who's listened to my poetry knows that it's important to me. I think it's sort of like a sense. I've got a great sense of injustice,
Yeah.
and sort of like the need for social justice and the need for equality. For me, it's all about um, if you take something really, really simple, uh, people who come to an open mic and they're told that it's two, but they read three, and
Oh,
people who are told they got 5 minutes or they got, you can read one long poem or two short poems, and they read one long poem and then
they're the sort of the
another.
people that pull the lead on their dog. Do you know what I mean? They're like, "Grr," like when they
Yeah,
mean
I
that,
mean,
like,
it's,
look
I
at.
mean, so even at that level, and so social justice is like a further extension of that. When I see in Canterbury, when I see in Canterbury people living down, by the side of the road, people living in tents, when I realise, how much money is made by companies who stop the homeless from sitting down because the government's paid them to make bobbly paving stones and spikes on window sills and seats that don't have any arms, all that stuff. I mean, I was outed once by someone we both know, not in a bad way, in a humorous way, because Michael Gove was making some terrible thing at schools that you had to learn poems off by heart. And so I just did a revenge poem against Michael Gove because I just thought, what are you doing? Jacob Rees-Mogg said if people had used their common sense, then they wouldn't have died in Grenfell. And so I have
Oh,
to write about that.
yeah.
I have to write about how those things are wrong. Like the DUP, when they came into power in Ireland, or when they were trying to come into power in Ireland, were taking money from left, right, and centre, but at the same time were anti-abortion and anti-gay rights. So the day I hear that on the news, that's when I go and write that poem. So yeah, it's very important to me, but it's not the only thing because
Oh, yeah, of course.
you can't exist like that the whole time. Sometimes you're just lonely and you write about being lonely. Sometimes you're in love and you write about being in love. You can't just be a political animal all the time because I think someone said once, like, yeah, okay, I know that's your, I know that's what you want to talk about, but if you keep talking about it, does anybody want to hear it? And
Mm,
also, I know that's
I
what you
see.
want to
They
talk
need,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, I know that's what you want to talk about, but are you aware of how everybody else feels about it?
Yeah,
So
that's very true. I think I was going to bring this up later if I could, but it kind of fits in now. When I look at, when you were in your 20s, or a teenager, I kind of feel like you were lucky because there was the prospect of real change and real hope. And it might have not been real, it might have been an illusion, right? But you had punk, you had rock and roll, you had ska, you had counterculture, you had real counterculture. and there was a sense of, with this counterculture, we will do X, or once we achieve X, we will facilitate change. I think in my time, there is no counterculture look per se, because it's just um, you know, throughout all culture. And I think when I look at the full picture of what the situation is, I feel like they have you by, to explain how I feel it is, they have you by the balls and they have you by the throat. I don't think there is now any sense of, we will do X and we will do Y. And today I sort of thought to myself that I actually have no hope for it. I see it as, one world government. Bill Gates is going to come around and kill me. If they want to clear land and get something underway or tactical position, they'll kill however many millions of people they need to do it like that. And there is no sense of, oh, I'm in the civil rights movement. I'll go and give a beautiful speech. My name's James Baldwin or Maya Angelou, and then the world will change. Or, I'm a punk. I'm going to do X. And I feel like now, you know, um, the bars are there and you can see them, so you can't really do anything but go like that with your cup.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't have to disagree strongly, but I did. But I think when we were, I mean, in the early 70s, which I'm not old enough to actually have obviously been an adult in, but in the early 70s, they were like a 3-day week. There were brilliant things. There was like, if you listen to our parents, you could hate your job one day, walk out of it, and go and get another one. But then there were
Mm.
massive moments of poverty. There were times when there wasn't even enough money to run the power plant, so we had candles at night, and we didn't have electricity for another period. There were huge industrial strikes and industrial action, whether it was Wapping, whether it's steel plants, coming into it. We had the things that we were up against was sort of like apartheid, marching for jobs in the 80s. People were coming down. Unemployment was absolutely, completely and utterly massive, and you didn't necessarily feel powerless, but you felt like unless you did something, even if it was marching, unless you did something, nothing was going to change. I mean, there were people marching, people going to Aldermaston, people going to Greenham, people marching against the Conservatives, against Barclay Bank, against apartheid, against all this sort of stuff. Late 70s, early 80s, a lot of race problems, anti-Nazis and that. But we never thought that we were. Well, I can't talk for everybody else. I can only talk for myself. It was the idea that by saying something and doing something and showing your allegiance, you were doing something.
Mm.
And whether that ended up with throwing bricks or throwing bottles or breaking windows or stealing or breaking into property, there was that. But now, I think now it's colossal now. I went to a meeting about the First World War in the University of Kent, and it was talking about how miners had been used in the First World War, and the professionals there were asking questions that were longer than the answers because they just wanted you to know how clever they were. I think it was so and so and so and so who said. And then the worst bit about it was a bunch of trade unionists who were basically saying, young people have given up on everything. Young people will never do anything. Young people will never make a difference because they're not in a union. And they just had the biggest anti-war march ever, with millions of people walking through London, during the Gulf War. Anti-austerity march was massive. The marches recently have been colossal. I think climate change action. I think it's always gone on, and I think now people are very much involved. Whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's equal rights, I think there are protest after protest after protest, um, particularly for the environment. So, no, I feel very positive about youth. I
Oh.
think there are people who are wearing it. I do. I think there are people who are wearing it like a badge, but we did. There were people, you went up on a train to say like a pro CND or an anti-nuclear march, and there were people who just wanted to fight the police, and there were people who just wanted to loot things and nick things, and there were people who wanted to break things. But in the same way, there were loads and loads and loads of people who wanted to have a voice and wanted to be seen and wanted to feel that they made a difference. And I think it's exactly the same now. I think young people, if anything, are just as committed, if not more, than my generation. I think
Mm.
what's different is if you wanted to be known as something and if you wanted to represent, then you wore a badge or you carried a placard. Now, a lot of people are on social media, and social media is it's just a different badge, but because people are getting likes and getting known for it, it's seen as a negative. It's seen as, they're only doing it for themselves, and some of them are. But it's a bit like when someone keeps posting their poems on social media and they're
Oh,
going, here's
we
today's
all know that
poem.
most.
Well, no, anyone, but
um,
here's today's poem, here's today's poem, here's today's poem, here's today's poem. You have to
yeah,
ask yourself what you're doing it for.
I feel like I can no longer, talk to people who want me dead. Like, I feel like I can no longer sit and smile and say, "Oh, well, it's nice that you want me dead, but have you considered not wanting me dead?" Or, um, you know, "I had one cracker this year, could I have two the next?" And, kiss the hand that feeds and all this stuff. I feel like I have had my psychological and emotional fill of people that want me dead. And when I say people that want me dead, I don't mean me as set necessarily, me as an individual, me as an Iranian, me as a queer person, me as anything person, any label. I mean me and the values that I hold dear, or the things that I think we need to carry on all living in peace rather than slaughtering each other. And I feel like even if it costs me work or money or friendship or company, any other time other than now, I would have put up with it, but I think now I can no longer drink from the cup.
Right. So in terms of perspective, is I could see for me like words like always and never and everyone are like impossible conundrums. I'll love you forever. Well, hopefully you will, but you might not. I'll always be there for you. All of us. It's when the news comes on, it says a nation grieves for Diana. No, it doesn't. Maybe 50%, maybe 40%. And the death of our queen. We are a country united by the death of our queen. What the Olympics games have done has shown us that we're all one people under the sun. No, it hasn't. I think all those things are almost meaningless statements. What's
Mm.
important is what do you do and how do you get through? And if you are lucky, you get through because you've made good friends who will listen to you. You've got family or lovers or friends or partners who will actually come to you in your deepest, darkest hour of need. I think the difficulty is trying not to see everyone else as the enemy, because most people don't give a shit. They don't
Next
care.
question.
They don't know. But what I mean is they don't even know you exist. So it's not and I'm not talking about the situation in Gaza. I'm not talking about Palestine. I'm not talking about things which are actual life and death. I'm not talking about Ukraine. I'm talking about things where you're having a really shitty day and you think the whole world's against you. Most people don't even know who you are. There are people who don't even know where Kent is. There are
Well, I
people.
don't blame them. Anyway,
Well,
what
that's what I mean. There are
what a
people who.
beautiful life those people lead. No, just jokes. All the Kent viewers, just jokes and banter. I've been reading a lot of James Baldwin recently. He said, you know, I'm not going to live another 100 years. How much longer do I have to wait for your progress? It's taken up my time. It's taken my mother's time. It's taken my father's time. It's taken my partner's time. It's taken my children's time. How much more time do you want for your progress? And he said that a while ago. So we're a bit but anyway, it's all good, and we can just keep smiling and eating carbohydrates. Um, right. This is sort of going back to earlier topics. Do you feel like you champion a people or the underdog or a certain group or whatever? I'm thinking of the poem in your pamphlet, Blackberries, in this pamphlet here. I'm sure
Yeah.
you'll get it. And do you feel like that's accurate?
No, I can't. I've got no right to champion anything. I think you know what you know and who you know. And like I used to hate the police, and it was a knee jerk reaction, hate the police, and it came out of seeing very very bad situations where the police were violent to protesters or whatever, violent to other people. Now
Mm.
I've got four people who I would consider my some of my very best friends who are police. And so it's who does the individual treat you? So what I write about, I don't think I champion anything. I was offered a job once because you're a white working class male who talks the same language as the pupils. Well, fuck that. Their idea was that because this is a headmaster and a deputy head of a secondary school in Kent, because I wear a suit, kids won't listen to me. Well, no, it's not because you wear a suit. It's partially because you don't wear a suit, but it's mainly because you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know how to talk to those people. You don't know how to listen to those people. You don't know how to listen to your pupils. So for me, I can't represent the working class because there's immediately someone who turns around to me and says, "We're not working class anymore." I don't. I wouldn't dream of saying that having been a teacher for 25 years, just because I had 3 years unemployment before that, I can tell you what the unemployed feel. I can tell you what I felt like as an unemployed person. I think I don't. Occasionally, if I'm really asked to strip it down, I'll say, well, there are people who don't have a voice, but
Mm.
I'm not champion in them. I'm just thinking, okay, this character in this poem, this is what he thinks. This person in this story, this is what she thinks. This is what
I
they
have
think.
actually the desire to tell an individual story, that isn't necessarily my own. I think that's very tempting to a poet.
Yeah, and I quite enjoy it. I mean, one of the deadliest things. So I don't think I champion anyone. Um, it's the story more than anything else, and that sounds like I don't care, but I don't even know if I've got the right to champion anyone. But the flip side of that um, is that we can. Someone said to me, basically about my writing. They said, "Oh, so are you always going to be angry?" And then what that majorly makes you do is go to your back catalogue and find the love poems and find the poems about the butterfly and find the poem about grasshopper fishing with your dad. It's this idea of people are just one thing and that's all you are. And that for me is utterly boring and not
Mm.
true when we can't possibly be just one thing. And
Well, I mean,
I just think
everyone's a
it's
whole
really
world.
lazy. Yeah. I think it's really lazy to say things like, "Oh well, I can always tell it's your poem because of the language you use, or because of the way you structure verses, or whatever." And I think it's people can be very happy to point out flaws, and whether
Mm.
that's how much right do you have to say that because you haven't done that. If we only ever wrote about what we personally experienced, there wouldn't be half the novels in the world, if not three-quarters of the novels in the world.
Mm.
There wouldn't be all the invention that there is. It's the idea of someone. There's two things. At the University of Kent, some of the tutors would say, "Don't forget that the narrator isn't always the writer, right?" And that's perfectly 100%
Obviously,
true. Yeah,
yeah,
but then to say, no, the narrator isn't the writer when the writer themselves has told you this is my story is just
yeah,
absolutely ludicrous. And so
yeah,
it's that idea of every time someone goes, "I didn't," is that true? Well, it doesn't matter if it's true.
yeah,
Did that happen to you? Well, it doesn't matter if it happened. Does it work as a poem? Is it interesting?
yeah. What do you think it takes to be a good editor? And what would you say like your top three tips are for editing? Like a quick like, can I give my top three tips to editing?
I'm going to count it because you said quick now, so I'm going to have to count. I'm putting the timer on to
Only
see how quickly you
don't
do it.
put a capital for each line. Only do it if it makes sense as a sentence, like you've had a full stop. Take out as many little words as you can, like a, the, blah 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 blah. And I've only got two. That's why I need an editor.
You must
Anyway,
have more than two. You don't like editors, though.
no, I like editors.
Okay, all right, and fine.
Or do I?
Uh, it, no, for me, it's like, does it feel like it's connected? Unless it's meant to be deliberately fractured, does the piece feel tonally, themically, delivery wise, form wise, does it feel like it's connected? If you're reading it and you're stumbling over it, or if somebody can't understand it because they aren't the person who left out that punctuation, then you have to say to yourself, okay, I wrote that,
One of my
but
tutors said to me once,
is
you
it
have to imagine
accessible?
the punctuation. One of my tutors said to me once, you have to imagine the punctuation, which was an interesting kind of. But I have taken that on board in the right way going forward, and I think, yeah, some things you can sort of, you don't have to keep putting it in. It can sort of. So I don't think that's terrible advice.
No, I think it's got to, it's, does it work?
Yeah.
Not, it's not just does it work for you, it's like, does it work? Is what you're trying to say important enough? Like when I've judged competitions and I can just write and question mark, that means nothing resonated, nothing,
Yeah, I
nothing
think that's a
pings,
really
nothing zang,
important.
nothing did anything.
Yeah, I think there's a really important thing that we're missing though, and that is the most important thing when I read a poem. Does it have style? And by that I mean like I don't mean stylistic. I mean does it have style? Like is it like cool? Like does it have the spark? Is it like yeah, do you know what? Like yeah, like when you listen to a good bit of music and you're like, yeah. And it's like people underestimate that. Like I used to well like teach like as if that went well, but like I used to be in schools and like the teacher can never ever say that the poet did it because they felt like it. And like if someone was to ask me why did you do X, Y, and Z, I would say because I felt like it, because I was bored, because I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
And there are so many things like that. Like people rarely talk about how much toilet humor there is in Shakespeare and things like that. Like I think, and sometimes people say to me like, "But who are all these different voices in your poems?" And I just say, "Well, they're fractured voices and they're feelings." So I think you can't underestimate style or like what young people call riz. That was cringe. Um, and you can't underestimate just something being beautiful for the sake of it. Beauty is a valuable thing, um, and it's an art.
I'm not sure that I'm okay with the word style. I know what you mean. I think it's kind of like has it got a presence? Has it got a life?
Mm,
does it feel like it resonates? Does it feel like it vibrates? And you can read loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of poems just because they're lovely, or that seem to be saying something that's emotional, or
mm,
that are nostalgic, or whatever. But it's rare that you read a poem that goes bang, or that read a poem and they go, hold on, I don't get that. Or poems that make you feel emotionally very, very charged. So I don't necessarily think it's style. I think it's like that's
yes.
I don't. I think it's like what makes this stand out, what makes this feel different, and sometimes that is the fact that you don't immediately understand it, and sometimes it's the fact that it seems to feel exactly how you think. But if something feels like an exercise,
Mm,
like there are poems which are written purely to win prizes, and people know how to win a prize, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Like when someone says, for example, if you're going to submit to a magazine, go and read the last year's loads of that magazine and see what they want. You'd be moronic not to, or rather you'd be optimistic not to. But the idea of submitting to somewhere where you don't know what if they've got a house style, or whether they're interested in, you know, sort of like the human condition, would be ludicrous.
But
You know,
someone like Sylvia Plath, you wouldn't print her poems and they wouldn't be winning competitions now, but you meet her at the point of you go to meet her, she doesn't come to meet you. And I think that gets underestimated sometimes.
would someone be able to come to meet you though if they don't know you? So
No, but
how would someone
but you
come to meet you?
but you've got to be your own star. You've got to be your own main character. You've got to have your myth, your personality, your persona, your influences, your ideals, your sympathies, you are your whole package, your whole vision,
But
you
is
know.
that you walking, like we all know people who are very concerned about what they wear on stage and will put as much effort into picking a dress or picking a boa or picking, you know, a hat or picking a cloak or whatever. Um,
Cloak.
um, but it's
Literally her
but
own coat.
the poem has got to work. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you wear on stage. The flip side of that is there are people who their personality is they want to portray themselves as the wounded poet or the vacant
Mm.
poet
The
or
Bukowski.
yeah, and we've seen it 1,000 times. You know, if anyone's going to do it, you know, Shane McGowan's done it. You know, a
He
million
did it
times
well
better.
though. Shane McGowan did it well. And
Yeah,
Bukowski did
but
it
what I
well.
mean is, we don't need another one. We don't need another small. You know, Brendan Behan's done it. Oliver Reed's done it. Richard Harris has done it. Peter O'Toole's done it. Anyone can be a drunk, lyrical, slightly boorish, slightly leery person. But when you come on stage and you go, "Oh God, I've forgotten my set list," or "Oh
Your
God,
cloak.
you know, I've forgotten." Does anybody know these first words? If what you are is a character
Mm.
and you're doing it like there was a guy called Rick Mail used to have this character called Kevin Turvey, and he was an investigative journalist. And one of the things that his character was that he wasn't very good at it, but he was slightly mad and he was slightly deranged.
Mm.
His other character, Rick, was reading
Mm.
bad poetry, really, really bad poetry, and that was what he did. Tim Keys is a good poet sometimes, a terrible poet most of the time. But what he has decided that he's going to be a poetic figure. You know, he's gonna portray himself as a figure. So it's not necessarily that he stretches and does loads and loads and loads of different types of writing because he's gone into character mode. But he's a comedian who does that.
You
What does
know,
that mean? What does that mean?
it means
You
you
go
have
to
to.
them. You because if it doesn't matter what they write,
You're
then
there for this.
why go to them
You're
at
there
all?
for the style, and you're there for the joy, and you're there to share their words and feel the magic. You know, you're not there like, oh, this better be a, literary, makes sense on every level. You're there to,
But
why.
isn't that fandom?
Mm,
Isn't that loving someone so much? I mean, I I love Radiohead, and I could listen to it every day of my life.
yeah.
But I went to see The Smile, which is the next Radiohead band,
Mm,
and I don't think they even cared if we were there. They were playing the type of music that they wanted to play, and I applaud that. They were playing for however long they wanted to play, and I applaud that. But I didn't dance once, and I didn't sing. So if I'm, you know, my allegiance to Tom York you know, I will call my firstborn if I ever have one, which I won't, after him. But if someone was to say to me, "What do you think of The Smile?" I'd have to go, "Well, no, really."
mm.
You know, that's the only thing I've ever wanted tattooed on my body is every band I've ever loved. And the problem with that is, first two albums are great. then the third and the fourth are dodgy, and then by the time you come up to seventh, they've been convicted of sex crimes. So, you know, how do you do it? How do you have that? And I think it's like there are poets who are absolutely, completely and utterly fantastic. Like I really love Luke Wright, but he can write a one act play for an hour and remember it, and all the points are joined up, and there's jumps and there's skips and there's coming back on itself. But I
That's
don't,
correct.
I don't need him to wear a frock coat to do that. I don't need him to be drunk to do that. I don't need him to do all those things. I think what I find fascinating is when you see him live and afterwards he can barely move and he can barely walk because he's worn himself out. It's like James Brown. He's had to remember all this stuff and
Mm.
deliver it. But at the end of the day, he's just another bloke who's been divorced. You know, it's just he's a normal mortal human being. I love John Cooper Clarke, but sometimes John Cooper Clarke is just a caricature of John Cooper Clarke. You know,
Yes, indeed.
I think Larkin was probably very happy, but that's not how he presents himself.
Indeed.
How's this going, Seth?
This is going bloody brilliant. I think this might be the best one we've ever done.
No,
Um,
you've already said that Tree is your favourite.
are you like getting the whole vibe of it? Like, I
I don't
even
even know
thought
who Tree is.
she's
Um,
great. You should go back and watch. You should go back and watch the episode.
well, I did when you first told me, but she didn't stick in my. It's stick in my
I
head.
said, I said to my sister, "Do you watch my podcast?" And she went,
Well,
no."
there's your answer, isn't it?
And that was the lines that I used to advertise the podcast. And then after that, I got blocked.
Who did you get blocked by, though?
Oh no, don't worry.
Okay.
No one.
No,
Hypothetical.
but how do you think it's going? That's the most important thing.
I think it's going absolutely beautifully, and I'm so happy with it. But it could be like more crazy with like props and stuff, but it
With
depends on
props and stuff.
yeah.
Get out of it. Props. I don't know what you wanted from me, so I don't know. I don't even know why you're interviewing. Why are you interviewing?
Because you're a significant person in the poetry scene in Kent. You've been running events for
Kent
years.
or just like 7 miles of Kent? You know, I mean, that's another thing, isn't it? It's sort of like,
Why does Kent have so many poets? How many poets does it need?
well, I mean, you're opening up a whole can of worms there. I think we're really lucky. I think we're really, really, really lucky. You might
Yeah.
not necessarily like every sort of poem and every sort of poetry event, and you're not supposed to. You know, you're not. How can we possibly do it? But there are so many in Canterbury and Thanet and Tunbridge Wells, and and it's the same in Sussex and Eastbourne and Brighton. You know, you can't throw a dart into a calendar without coming up with an event that you could go to if you wanted to. And they're all very, very, very different, whether that's, sort of like neurodivergent stuff, whether that's slam, whether that's, far more, if you like, traditional
Mm.
paper-based stuff. I
My
think,
friend, our esteemed colleague Connor Sansby, um, says to me, it's the easiest form to not to be a master at, but it's the easiest art out there to pick and say, I'm I'm that thing. So it's easier to say I'm a poet than I'm a novelist, I'm a musician, I'm a painter, I'm a dancer, I'm a playwright,
yeah,
etc.
but by the same token, it's one of the very immediate ones where you fail. So you can tell someone you're a painter, and until you've got a patron, or until you've got an exhibition, you could tell someone that you're working on your next exhibition for 3 years. You can tell someone that you're a novelist and that you don't want to share anything with them because you're not sure about the basic structure. Or well, someone said to me the other day, I don't even think there is a plot. I don't think there is a plot. So you can say you're all those things. You can say you're a musician and never get on stage because I don't know, you don't jam, or you don't really do open mic, or as someone said, I don't read poetry unless I'm paid to. And then I'm looking at them thinking, well, how come you're sitting in a open micing deal in a pub and you're not getting paid to do it and you're reading free poems just like everybody else, you know. But I think the thing is with poetry, a bit like stand-up comedy, if you get up on stage and you read a poem and it's shit, there's nowhere to go. You can tell by people's faces whether or not it worked. You can tell by the lukewarm response of the thing. So I think in that respect, I understand what Connor means that, you know, you say I'm a poet. I think an easier one would be to say I'm a writer. But I think one of the things is as soon as you get up on stage, you know, if someone says to you I'm a novelist, and then they go, oh, how many have you published? Then immediately, as soon as you say none, or I've self-published 3, every cynical fucker in the world goes, oh right, okay, so you're not really, are you? You know, and it's like, oh, how much have you earned from the royalties? And I think we're just surrounded sometimes by people who want to be negative. And so
Yeah.
I think poets have to, it's got to work. If it doesn't work, it's straight away it's sort of.
I look like an Edward Munch painting here. It's like the Madonna.
But
Um,
you look like Edward Munch and a Madonna.
I look like an Edward Munch painting.
Oh, okay. Well, you could look like Madonna and Child as well, you
Indeed.
know, with all
Um,
the hair.
is music important to your writing? Well, we've already discussed Radiohead. Shall I go first?
Um,
My answer. No, you go first. You're the guest.
sometimes it depends on the type of music. If I'm writing about an era, then music's very important. The only stuff that I can write to without getting involved because it doesn't really have lyrics that I can understand is Sigur Rós. So
Mm.
I can write to and about Sigur Rós all the time because it's orchestral and it's instrumental and it's emotional. I know he's singing in Icelandic, but I don't speak Icelandic.
They sound like
Um,
they record underwater.
well, yeah, highly possible. But you know, music itself, it can really interrupt me because I've got such a high love for music that if I'm not in the zone, it blocks me from writing. So it acts as a negative. If I had my way, I would write in complete and utter silence.
Oh God.
Oh God,
Um.
indeed.
What is your favorite song?
Have you got onto music now? I can't answer that.
Why not?
I,
What's your
I
favorite song at the moment? Oh my God, I'm going to answer Black Pearl Jam. Yours.
right. Okay, so you're living in the past then. So
Pearl Jam were amazing. Do you remember when like Kurt Cobain dissed Pearl Jam? Like me and my sister, do you remember when he was like, "Oh well, if you want to listen to other Seattle bands, like you should like Pearl Jam," and it was just like he was like people forget like how bitchy he was, but it's great. Like
but I think you know, I can tell you what possibly my favorite book ever is.
book,
Yeah,
go on
just
then.
if you'd like to turn it back to literature, because it's too easy for me to talk about music. Um, The Road, Cormac McCarthy. I think it's
Oh, what's wrong with you?
I think it's just absolutely brilliant. I think
Could
it's
you
great. I think the
pick a more
film of it
ugly,
is
horrible book?
no, not at all.
That's such a
It's about the
problem.
end of the world. It's about the apocalypse.
Oh God, that's
It's about
do you know
losing and having love. It's about fear. It's about
that tells me so much about you, and it's not
really, you're the one who
it's not
thinks that everyone's out to get us and we're all going to die, and Bill Gates is actually personally going to come into your house and kill you. Whereas I think the world's not really that bad a place.
Bill Gates is gonna come into my house and be like, "Hasta la vista, baby," and he's just gonna like,
I think I think it's a great book. I really love it. The other one that I can go back to again and again and again and
"Oh,
again and again is more or less anything by Ian Banks, but particularly The Wasp Factory.
what's wrong with you?"
And you know, it's the same. They're really intelligent, articulate books. They're just
Well,
great,
how peculiar.
strange, weird. Cement Garden is another is another brilliant book.
We
You know
better move on quickly.
why? You're so unfair.
You could have picked something like Mrs. Dalloway,
Why would I do that? I don't even know what it is. Who's written that?
Virginia Woolf.
Oh well, you love Virginia Woolf. I don't.
You could have picked
I find
something
a lot of that stuff torturous. Could
bloody.
I pick Captain Morelli's mandolin? Could I do that?
Oh, okay. Behind the scenes, we need to talk. Wink,
Right.
wink.
We probably don't. But
Um,
this is your podcast. You know.
yeah. I know. How do you don't get this at all? Like the vibe of this podcast at all. I should have sent you.
What do you mean I
Do
don't
you?
get the vibe of this podcast? I'm stone cold sober, answering every question you ask me.
Yeah,
I
but
get the vibe of this podcast, but you've gone
I
more
see
into
the theory.
music. You
I see
cynically
the.
go, I don't know about teaching, I don't know about writing, I don't know about that, but what do you think of it? What is it? What is it for you? And then I tell you my favorite book of all time, and you diss it. That's terrible. You know,
That's horrifying.
not
Um,
really. It's a really well written book, but it's a shit film. So if you've only seen the film, then that may be why you did it.
I
You know.
have. I think you know that I have read the book. Um,
Like, I love some Hemingway and other stuff that I can't stand. I
yeah,
love George
Hemingway's great.
Orwell and other stuff that I
Okay,
can't
right,
stand.
right. Let's get this sorted out right now. Do you like The Great Gatsby?
I think it's all right.
Oh my God.
I do.
See, I'm.
I think it's all right. It's about another world that has no interest for me at all, because it's about someone who sort of like let's chase money, let's chase power,
But
let's
it's about
chase recognition.
beauty. It's about lost glamour. It's that decaying glamour. It's that,
Yeah, but
it's
again,
that.
that's you talking about surface. I'm not interested in surface. I'm much more interested in how he struggles to form
It's not.
relationships.
It's not about surface because can you imagine the loss of pride and the hurt involved with a
Yeah, but you
fall
see,
from
that's different. That's
grace?
not glamour. You said glamour.
It's the fall from grace, the glamorous Hollywood fall from grace. It's like a
Ah,
sepia thing. It's in sepia.
oh dear, really?
It's not
Something
through
you
a
have to
the
watch it.
viewfinder or a gun like your favorite books.
What
Um,
what what film would you watch again and again and again?
oh my God, right. Finally, the good questions.
Well,
Okay.
you run this podcast, so you ask the questions. So
Right.
if there aren't any good questions, that's up to you.
Right. Lord of the Rings, the first one, Fellowship of the Ring. I watch that almost weekly. And
Wow.
the first Matrix. And I would say my fashion is either cottagecore, so The Hobbit, or Matrix Industrial. Okay, yours.
Cottage whore,
Oh dear.
and
Um,
that's from Lord of the Rings, is it? The Hobbit. That's
that's
for there.
it.
Cottage whore. That's your
That's what
thing.
that's what I remember. Was that not was that not it? All right, what's yours?
Um,
You're gonna say something sick. You're gonna be like it
no,
or
no,
something.
no. Um, I really love Apocalypse Now, even though it's a rewrite of Heart of Darkness. But
Oh, I love Heart of Darkness.
there
Okay,
you go.
Heart of
See,
Darkness, one of my favorite books.
but I think on occasion it's far too. I think Apocalypse Now is too long. There's an interesting version where they left all the French stuff in up the river, and I think it's good. I really like how it shows the destruction of man and how people suffer without even knowing why they're suffering. So I really love that. Born on the 4th of July. I love Born on the 4th of July, but I prefer Platoon. So there's a lot of war here. There's a lot of
I'm
Vietnam here.
realizing that we're very different people.
Yeah, well, so we should be. I'm not dating you. I'm not married to you, and I'm not your relative.
But
Um,
even if you were all of those things, A, we'd be in prison, and B, um,
we'd be in prison.
you
We
should
wouldn't be
probably
in prison. I really like,
you're my relative.
my favorite. I think my favorite film of all time. So I love, without a shadow of a doubt, is A Matter of Life and Death. It's just a brilliant film, and if you've never seen it, it's just an amazing film about someone who is torn between two lands. They fall in love with someone on the night they in theory die, and then the people in the heavens are trying to claim them for theirs, and the people on earth are trying to claim them for theirs. It's a brilliant film.
A modern one for me would be Call Me by Your Name. That was gorgeous. that was just absolutely falling in love in Italy, and Italy is like, you know, you fall in love with it. So Call Me by Your
And
Name,
who's the star?
the book was stunning as well. I read the book first. Star Timothy Chalamet, and then that guy that turned out to be a cannibal.
Oh, that one. Little things like that. No, I think there's films that I would watch over and over again. Blade Runner, I would watch over and over again.
Oh
I
yeah,
think it's a
good
great
choice.
film.
And
The
finally,
first Alien, you know,
oh
I think it's
finally,
great. Yeah, but why are we talking about films? Do you know?
Space Odyssey 2001 as well.
Not sure about that. Not sure about that. I think we're living in a much like the 40s more so than the 50s. I think sort of like um there are made some great films, but I think now what we've got is nuance. In the olden days of like film noir, a person just had to wear a a
Mm.
raincoat. In the early westerns, in, in the early western, well, a raincoat and a trilby with a hat with the brill turned down. You know, in early westerns, it was like a black hat as opposed to a white hat.
And I tell you what, we're out here. We need to do so much more than a raincoat. Honestly, every day we're working. Back then, it was just a raincoat.
Well, it was, I mean, I mean, if you look at the original version of Cape Fear, and then you look at the new version of Cape Fear or the newer version of Cape Fear, they're utterly different films, and I think we are lucky to live where we live. Music, and in the time we live, music is like you can have any type of music under the sun. Whether
Mm.
that's, I mean, the fact that Ed Sheeran is like a world superpower and has billions and billions and billions of followers just by singing in a guitar on stage and maybe having a pedal is amazing that that can exist at the same time as Radiohead, at the same time as PJ Harvey, at the same time as all these brilliant bands and all these great musicians. At the same time, it's just a miracle. But it's
Mm.
always been like that.
Indeed, indeed, it
Have you
has.
lost track of this?
No, look, I got my thing here. Look, this is my package.
Written on the back of an envelope? Or is
Okay,
that it? Is there stuff in there?
no. What is your now we're getting into it. What is your conception of the supernatural? Now, before we get involved with this, I remember you said to me, you feel energy is left behind, but you were unable to apply your theory to a wider, to wider implications. So I'm going to give you the chance now to develop your ideas.
Thank you. Right. No, it's sort of like I don't really believe in organized religion, and I don't really believe in religious leaders. And I
Mm.
don't know if I think there could be someone, there might have been someone like Jesus, because there were always people.
In fact, there was
Well,
anything.
there are always people who. Someone said to me the other day, we were talking about having had a good day at work, and I thanked the team, and they said, "Well, no, it's because the Lord is in you." And you just think, well, I
Christ
think
like.
I think I would have felt him if he was in me. To be honest with you, I think it would have been quite an uncomfortable walk into work. I don't think I
Mm.
would have been able to drive or sit down at various points.
Yeah,
But
that's what
I think everybody has an energy. You can tell someone who has a negative energy. You can tell if someone's had a bad day. You can tell if someone doesn't want to talk. You can tell if someone. There are
But
people
what
who
is
walk.
that energetic plane? Can that be utilized? Can that be applied? Can that be, we need
How
to think about these things. We need to think a bit
how
further along.
how
Give me
can
one
you
second.
suck it into a box like like what's that one where Ghostbusters? Can you suck it into a box like Ghostbusters?
Or like the Tesseract in Marvel.
You get people. I'm not going to apologize for what I read, and if I fuck it up, then I will stop it and read it again properly. I think
Mm.
it's not about knowing your work inside out, because that way it can be dead. What I used to do was I used to write if I felt like I was my body was out of control and my mind was racing too fast, then I would write on the page what I was supposed to do there. Pause or increase or faster or louder or whatever, and I would accentuate all the punctuation and I would do it. But it's just practice. It's sitting at home reading it with until you don't sound like an idiot. And some days you
Yeah.
just don't feel it. I had a gig probably about 6 months ago that I just didn't feel it
Yeah.
because I didn't have any connection with the audience. And so
Mm.
in my own head, I'm thinking blah, 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 because they were
Yeah.
giving me nothing. There's if you do it, if you gig at the poetry cafe, they don't clap. They let you do your whole set without clapping. Not only do they not clap, but they don't even look at you. They sort of like look down or close their eyes and whatever. And I don't like that. I think it's kind of like this weird idea about this is serious. This is so serious. We're not going to show you our appreciation.
Do you like Alice in Chains?
It's nice to know that you're listening to what I say. Where is the Alice in Chains connection with what I just said? Sometimes it depends
Oh,
it depends what album.
yeah,
Everybody
they're
goes
very,
a lot of
very,
people
very
go on too
dark.
long. Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us a bit about your degree?
Which one?
I don't know. Let's skip that question. Um,
No, I think that's an important question if you wanted it.
no. All right, go on then.
No, no, we'll skip it. It's
Okay,
okay.
cool. Um,
Because you
can you
should at
tell us?
least know which one you wanted to ask me about.
Well, you've got so many qualifications. Could you tell us a bit about your career as a teacher? Nah.
You're not interested in that either.
Finding jobs now versus then. Well, we've covered the disastrous state of the country.
Yeah. It's nice to know that you're laughing without any kind of form of alcoholic aid, bearing in mind the fact you think that the world is absolutely, completely and utterly shit.
I've just got here as a bullet point, world ending.
Yeah.
But we've
Well,
covered that.
that does interest me, the world ending.
I'm trying to tell you that the world is ending and you're not accepting it.
Well, everything's one of the most disingenuous, self-important, negative um, adverts in recent years, and I can't even remember what the product is, but it's basically we're the first generation to realize that we've destroyed the world.
Mm.
And it was about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's this idea that this generation is the only generation who are going to make any difference. This generation
Oh,
is the only generation who's going to save the world. People have been protesting machinery destroying the countryside, and landscape gardening destroying the countryside, and roads destroying the countryside, and they've
I'm
been
trying
doing.
to tell you that they have an unimaginable grip on us, and I'm trying to tell you that for me, when
Who
Obama
does?
when Obama got in, I that idea of the Republican and the Democrat for me shattered. Like I emotionally, I could no longer buy into the idea of a Democrat and the world's going to be good and things are going to change and everything's hunky dory. I think it might be because of how many bombs Obama dropped on Yemen. That was definitely a factor of it, but I also just emotionally felt disconnected from it. I'm trying to tell you about poison in the food, poison in the water, a constant surveillance state, killing with impunity, terrible living conditions, people pitted against each other and happy to go along with it. Um, I am saying to you, no way out and only nothingness to look forward to, and you're not getting it. You're not
No,
getting it.
I just don't agree with you.
If they turn up
For
and
everyone
they've
who's
got
an
you against the
arsehole.
wall and they've got the gun to your back, are you going to be standing there going, "Well, I still think they've got us. That's it."
They haven't got us. They haven't got us. For every, how many people, let's say, right, let's just purely take it on your world, right?
Mm.
How many people do you think you know?
I mean, I don't know anybody because I don't have any,
All right. How many people are in your life, whether that's as a friend or family or someone on the poetry scene or someone you work with? How many people do you know?
okay, people that I know and I wouldn't necessarily count as a friend, maybe a few hundred, but people in my
Right. Okay.
life, maybe about 20.
Okay. So you can take it as a few hundred or you can take it as 20, right? How many of them are absolute cunts?
Well, the wider circle, obviously, I'm not close to, but the people I'm close to, I mean, a fair few of them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, how many of them wouldn't you leave with your children?
Out of the 20, I'd probably leave all of them with them.
Okay, so therefore the world isn't and can't be as shit in your world, right? There could be someone who ends up being absolutely completely and utterly horrible. There could be someone who's a racist. There could be someone who's a wife beater. There could be someone who's coercive. There could be someone who's a gambler. There could be someone who's an alcoholic, right? But predominantly, the number of people that you know are nice people, even if they're boring, or people who are supportive, you know. And in
Yeah,
the
but
big scheme,
I need to know that I'm free in order to live,
how are you not free? Yeah,
and
we
being
are. We are.
behaviorally
We are
poisoned.
in the most, the country with the most. If you believe it, we're asked to believe that Britain has more cameras than Korea, that has more surveillance than Korea or China or Russia. And
Mm.
it's whether or not you believe that and how it affects you. You could go around, right? In Thanet, they're apparently going to charge people £100 for swearing in the street, right? So that's a Dickensian thing. That's back into the ancient days where behaviour liable to cause a breach of the peace, use of foul language, right? In reality, language is whether it's dick, fuckhead, wanker, cunt, whatever it is, twat, you choose to be offended. If you say to a policeman, "Morning, prick," you're not committing any crime at all. You're just putting yourself in the frame for someone to look you up on their number
Morning,
plate
Rick.
recognition software and find where you live. It doesn't mean anything at all. So you could wander around the whole of Newington, the whole of Thanet, the whole of Ramsgate, flicking V's at every camera and nothing.
Maybe not if I flick Visa cameras though. Maybe if I was Julian Assange, maybe they'd have my head. Maybe if I was half these other activists, maybe if I was the leader of Palestine Solidarity Campaign, what he's banged up now, isn't he? Or whatever branch he runs.
With
Maybe if I was it,
absolutely
maybe
that.
if I was it. So yeah, I can go around Newington smoking crack and flicking V's at cameras. You're right, and but that's not freedom. That's almost a behavior that is required. But if I try and make a positive change, if I try and make too much of a positive change, then
Yeah, but if you think about it can take a group of parents. The rule with speed limits around schools, right, is until somebody has had an accident and has broken a limb, they will not reduce the speed limit because there's no proven need to do it, right? So if
Mm.
schools can campaign for years and years and years to lower the speed limit around their school,
Mm.
okay? But they don't necessarily give up just because they say it's never going to happen, because the proof is that that school, at that school, at that school, it has happened. But if you view it that everyone is an arsehole, everyone is out to get you, everyone's going to kill you, everyone is going to steal your money, everyone's poisoning the water. Most people in government are inept.
Everyone
That
will kill you for a price. There's a price.
everyone will what for a price?
Everyone will kill you for a price. Everyone's got their price, Gary.
Yeah, but that's a bit like saying, my son, I would jump in the way of a bullet for you. Well, when's that going to happen in Eastbourne? When's that going to happen in Little Sidcup? When's that going to happen? It's not going to happen unless you happen to be walking past a clay pigeon shooting range, holding your child 5 foot in the air. It's meaningless. I love you more than the sun itself. It's utterly meaningless. I'd take a bullet for you. I would die for you. Well, I'd rather you stayed alive and looked after me and put a roof over my head and everything else. But if you would like to make a grand gesture, then that's absolutely fine. And I'm not talking about people who go to protest and people who WikiLeaks. I'm not talking about people who leak it. The guy who said there were no weapons of mass destruction,
Exactly.
we know what happens. Exactly. But
Is that right though? See, we look at Korea, we look at Russia, we look at these places and we think, we're better than them, but we're not.
no, I mean we've had spies. Britain invented, if not the concentration camp, then stay there and die camp in the Boer War. Sort of not letting food in, putting the women and children in a wire cage until their husbands gave up or lost the fight or whatever, starving them to death. It's a bit like to the bit to the spoils, you know, and the winner is the person who writes history. We always talk about Hitler. We always talk about Hitler because he was the person everybody fought against. Stalin had killed more people than Hitler before the war had even started. The starvation of Ukraine was sort of like, the great kind of apocalypse. All these things have been happening. We talk about
Is
how
this a humanity that we admire or we want to be part of?
that humanity. Yeah, but then again, you see, you can whip someone up into hating someone. You can whip someone. Look at Remain. Look at Brexit. Fear, 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 fear. And the win, if you can call it that, or the loss was tiny in comparison. But the vast amount of people are more concerned about whether their cucumbers have to be square. You know
Mm.
that's what's going on. Is that we're being we're being told to hate, but you don't have to hate. You can decide whether to hate. You can decide whether to be bleak. You can decide whether to give up on the world. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you can be happy. You can walk around and just pretend to be happy, but that's
yeah,
delusion,
but for some people, they're not pretending to be happy.
Yeah,
For
but
some people,
you have taken the blue pill,
see, this is
okay,
what you said the other day, and then you
and you think,
accused me of not connecting with you or anything. But it's
and
not a
then you
question.
feel
It's
like,
not a question of taking the blue pill. That's sort of like a kind of pop culture reference. I just happen to maybe I've been very, 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 very lucky in my life. Maybe I've been very, very, very lucky, and nothing bad's happened to me, or nothing terribly bad's happened to me. But by the same token, there are more people who've had a bland, boring, normal, settled, happy, comfortable life than there are who've been traumatized.
I don't think that's true. I think more people have. How many people are there in India, and how many of those people struggle every day to live compared to how many people there are in the UK? How many people are there in Afghanistan? How many people are there in Iraq? How many people are there in the Congo? I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, but we were initially talking about, you being surveilled in Britain and finding everything bleak. Like one of those things there, for example, is um, we send aid to India. India is one of the biggest tech giants in the world. Colossal intelligence, colossal industry, colossal powerhouse that everybody
Mm.
goes, there are a lot of poor people in India. But by the same token, there are a lot of poor people in India, but there are also absolutely monumental film industries, monumental tech industries, monumental design industries, monumental fabric and everything else industries.
Mm.
What we've got is an antiquated view of the world
Yes.
where, like in America, there's not just Republicans, there's not just Democrats. There are loads of people who don't buy into that system at all. and who are, every year going off grid and sort of like, deciding that they've rejected it.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Um, yeah, any shout outs? Are you working on anything at the moment?
You don't have to do that. Don't worry about it. I've always got. Well, by the time I shouted it out, it would have happened by the time you publish this podcast. You know,
That's so true. Well, yeah, oh yeah, what a ridiculous thing to say. Yeah,
it's
cool.
it's been
Okay,
a,
so
it's
let's
been it's been a, it's been interesting, which I know is one of your favourite words. And thank you very much for thinking of me. And
not at all.
I will come up with some better questions for you next time. Although that's not what we're supposed to do. You know,
Yes, here's Gary telling me what to do with my own podcast. Classic Gary stuff.
I'm not telling you what
Takes
to do with
charge
your
and
podcast.
control, tells everyone
I
what to
just think
do,
we spent a
and
lot of time talking about things that aren't about poetry.
that's the beauty of it. That's what I want for every episode. That's what I want every guest to bring, is just the general conversation. Right. I shall end this conversation now, and just remember, Gary's favorite book is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Okay.
Sarcastic.
No, which is a great book
Thank you
to
for
sort of,
asking me to be on your podcast.
not at all. No.
I'm
Okay.
sorry I didn't do it justice.
No, you did. Right. Anyway, good night. And good
Good
night and
night.
goodbye.